Hi, this is Ofoy Murray, the digital reader, and today what I'm going to kind of dive into is the ebook reader that I use. I have a Kindle because there are definitely some books that you can only get on Amazon, but the Kindle is not my preferred reader. My preferred reader is the Pocketbook eReader, and typically what I do is all of the ebooks I buy, I pull out the DRM. And I usually put them on the Pocketbook eReader. If I can't find a book, I'll get it off of Amazon. My preferred place to buy books, though, is ebooks.com. The ebooks.com site, they use a format called Adobe Digital Editions. I'll probably next week do another video kind of talking about Adobe Digital Editions. But Adobe Digital Editions is basically owned by Adobe, and any business that uses Adobe Digital Editions links to your Adobe Digital Editions account. And what that means is that any Adobe Digital Editions book you buy from any vendor, as long as you use as the login for the Adobe Digital Editions book you buy, your Adobe Digital Editions account, then they will all be linked together. So whatever device links to your Adobe Digital Editions account can see all the books that you bought that are Adobe Digital Editions. So I like that. It's just kind of a nice, cool way to use several different places: ebooks.com, Google, Smashbooks. All three of those use Adobe Digital Editions. So does Libby. Libby gives you a choice to use Adobe Digital Editions. Now, Pocketbook is a European company. It's not really well known in North America. Most in North America, it's usually going to be Kobo, Amazon, and Barnes and Nobles. But one thing that people don't know is Pocketbook is basically the Kobo or the Amazon in a lot of European countries. It's actually been creating e-readers since 2007. It's out of Switzerland. It's a Swiss company. So they've been making e-readers a long time, and they actually have a pretty decent line of e-readers. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to their website and then kind of give you a quick view of their website and then show where you can get them in North America, which is basically Amazon. But I'll jump to Amazon's site and kind of give you an overview of their different models so you can kind of see what they're doing. And then I'll kind of give you an overview of just kind of the interface so you can see the interface. And then I'll talk about Pocketbook Cloud, which is my favorite part of Pocketbook, where you can just deposit any book format you want in their cloud and you can access it from all your devices. So first I'm going to take you to Pocketbook's website, created by readers for readers. This is the About Us portion, and as you can see, they were created in 2007. Now, a lot of people might think, well, they were created in 2007, but when did they really start making e-readers? Well, if you look at their site, they actually have a list of all of their e-readers that they made. 50 models. Their first e-reader was in 2007, so they've been in business. And if you look, they've made a ton of e-readers. So they're kind of like the Amazon for EU countries. And a lot of these models, like I said, are available through Amazon. So what I'm going to now do is take you to Amazon's website where you can see the Pocketbook store, and then I'll show you what models are available to us in the US. So in the US, and I'll kind of liken these to similar models in either Kobo's line or Amazon's line. So the basic Lux 4 is basically like the Kindle. The Pocketbook Era models are basically like the Oasis. The InkPad 4 models are basically like the Paperwhite models. And the InkPad Color models are basically like those new Kobo Color models. They also, though, have a model that's kind of like the Scribe called the InkPad X Pro. And they even have a model that has a bigger screen. And this is a 9.7-inch screen. It's called the InkPad Lite. But it has a big screen, but a little bit lower resolution, 150 DPS resolution, although it's black and white. And then they have the Verse models. And the Verse models are basically like the most modern versions they have of the Amazon Kindle Basic. So, for example, the Verse models are like the Amazon Kindle Basic, and then the Verse Pro is waterproof, and the Verse Pro can also do audiobooks. So these are the models. All these models are available on Amazon, and that's why I would recommend you get them from. They have some places online that will sell them, and you can get them to the US, but the shipping is prohibitive, and some of those places just aren't terribly reliable. I've had a really good experience buying these from Amazon. They come quick. If you have Prime, there's free shipping. And if you have any issues or it doesn't turn out to be the kind of thing you're into, it has that same type of Amazon wonderful return policy. So I'm going to put the link directly to their store on Amazon's site in the notes of this. So this is a tour of the Pocketbook Reader interface. The interface is the same across all of their e-readers. They do have some devices that you can do note taking on. I'm not going to touch on to those too much, mainly because I'm focusing on e-readers. I don't really take that many notes. So the device is off, and this is the Pocketbook Color 3. I'll turn it on. And one nice thing about the Pocketbook is now the Pocketbook Color has the same processor as the Pocketbook InkBook 4. The Pocketbook InkBook 4 is black and white and pretty snappy. The Pocketbook Color, because they use the same processor, but it's doing all this color stuff, is a little bit more sluggish, but works for me. Once again, it's just an e-reader. So when you first turn on your Pocketbook Reader, the main screen will usually have at the top some of the books that are in your Pocketbook Cloud. And then at the bottom, it'll have some bestsellers from their bookstore. If you are a North American person, then their bookstore is, I don't want to say garbage, but it's not terribly useful. That's mainly because, the bookstore is meant to be used overseas. So even, for example, let me pull up a book. I mean, they have books that are typical to books that we would have here. But if you'll notice, everything's in euros. You make your purchase in euros and it automatically converts. But one nice thing about the Pocketbook line is that they really give you a chance to play around with some stuff. They really are focused on not forcing you to use their ecosystem. So for example, at the bottom, they have a list of their booksellers. But if I want to, I can go to their settings, and for their settings, they have a personalize, and in their settings, they have widget settings. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can personalize it. One way it's cool is books recommendations on home screen. I can just turn that off. And now when I go back to their main page, it just takes away their bookstore. Now, there's still a store icon there, but I don't really focus on it. The other cool thing is that because this uses Adobe Digital Editions, whenever you buy a Pocketbook Reader, it basically has an Adobe Digital Editions account linked to the device. But if you go into settings, and go to accounts and synchronization, you can see it has Adobe DRM. And what you can do is you can use your own personal Adobe DRM account. So for example, I could deactivate this and then activate an Adobe Digital account that I personally own. So it's not linked to the device. And what I mean by linked to the device is if you buy something on this device that's Adobe Digital Editions and their bookstore uses Adobe Digital Editions, then it will automatically download to this device, but it will be linked to their Adobe Digital Editions. If you put in your own Adobe Digital Editions account, which you can do, I'll show you. And you'll see you can add an Adobe account. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my personal Adobe account. Now, all the books that are in my Adobe personal account will show up here. So that's nice, so that I can now buy books from any place that uses Adobe Digital Editions. My favorite book source is ebooks.com, but I can buy from ebooks.com. I can buy from Kobo. I can buy from Smashwords. I can buy from a lot of those different places. Now, admittedly, even when I get my books in Adobe Digital Editions, what I do is I strip the DRM from them and then just store them in my Calibre. I still call Calibre Calibre because I feel like it's Libre, not Liber, but that's another thing. There's a very cool app called Calibre or Calibre. You decide how you want to pronounce it. And that's where I store all my books, and I store all of them in EPUB and MOBI format with no privacy protection attached to them. So you can just go back. So now I can go back, and that's kind of the main screen. You can also use audiobooks. I don't use audiobooks on my eReader, but you could. There's an internal memory that you can store audiobooks for. There's the store, but once again, it's not pushing it in your face. You can do notes. It does have some other nice settings. It has some apps. And the apps that it does have, I actually kind of like. It has chess and Klondike and Sudoku. I like those three apps because if I'm someplace and I'm reading for a long time and I just have my book reader, there are going to be times where I want to break. And sometimes if you take a break on your phone, A, you can use up your battery. B, you can go down a long rabbit hole. I really like that I can kind of take a break and play a quick game of chess or some Klondike or some Sudoku like that. The other cool thing about this, and once again, this is why I say it's really cool if you're just about ebook digital ownership, is you can sync with Dropbox. You can send to Pocketbook. And send to Pocketbook basically kind of works like Amazon Send to Kindle, where you're given an email address and you can email a book to Pocketbook Cloud. I never use it because it's just easier to go to Pocketbook Cloud, and I'll show you Pocketbook Cloud in a minute and how awesome that is. Another thing that's just cool to do is if you go to Settings, if you go to Personalize, then they have options to front light and dark mode. That has a sensor that turns the page automatically. Once again, I never use it. That's why I keep it off. LED indication. Whenever you power up or power off, this little tiny little LED on the bottom that lights up. You can decide whether you want that to happen or not. Key mapping is gestures and reading mode. This is when you're reading. This is really nice because when you're reading, you basically can configure different areas as to what you want it to do. Exit or a bookmark or a previous page or next page. I definitely like this where it kind of breaks it up into sections and you can tap different areas. You can see I don't use all of the areas. If it's upper left, it exits. I make next page on everything on the right. My reading menu is in the middle, and back is, if I tap back here, it goes back. But you can configure it. You'll see if I want to, it gives you a whole list of different things that you can use to configure it. And as you go down, logos, it's a little bit deceptive. Basically, your boot logo, you can decide if it's going to be Pocketbook's logo, your book cover, current page, or just a random logo. For both situations, and also when it powers off, it'll do the same thing. Pocketbook, book cover, a random logo, or none. So that's kind of cool. So a lot of these things, you know, they're somewhat similar to Kindle and Kobo and Barnes and Nobles, but I feel it gives you a lot more authorship into kind of how you want your device to work. It is also focused on, you don't have to use their bookstore and their ecosystem. It's really built like, whatever you want to read, just bring it over to our cloud and you can look at it on your device. So I'm gonna go back. And that's pretty much an overview of this as far as, you know, how it works and the speed. And I like these up and down buttons because sometimes when you're in the e-reader, swiping can be a little bit precarious. You know what? I'm gonna pop this open. Let's pop open Spells in Chrome. I tap that. It's gonna pull it from the Pocketbook Cloud. And you can see it's as snappy as you want to be. One also nice thing is they have buttons at the bottom here. So you can use the buttons to go forward and go backwards. So that's nice if you're that. I'm a person who generally likes to just tap. And as you can see, it's as snappy as anything, as any typical e-reader. And to get out of here, you can hit that and go back. But like I said, the way I have mine set on my screen when I'm reading is I have certain areas, and I actually have an area that jumps me back when I tap it there. And then I'm go back home. And this is not Android. This is a proprietary Linux OS for them. It does look a little like Android, and it has your drop-down menu. It has your settings. You can push a sync through. It has the gear for settings, for deeper settings. It has a way to customize controls. So this is kind of just a brief overview of the actual interface of Pocketbook e-readers. This is the color I have. As I mentioned, all of the Pocketbook e-readers have pretty much the same interface. And so if you get one of their current line, they'll all generally look like this. So all Pocketbook devices can read a host of different formats without conversion. They can do, of course, PDF, EPUB, MOBI. They can do HTML. They can do Word format. They can do RTF. They can actually do Apple's AZW format if you pull out the DRM. They can do Barnes & Noble's PRC format if you pull out the DRM. They can do image formats. They can do JPEG, bitmap. PNG and TIFF. They can do a whole host of audio formats. Some of the higher end devices like the InkPads and the Pocketbook eras can also even do text to speech. These have all the bells and whistles of all the typical high-end e-readers. Even if I do have some off formats, I know that this will support them. And when new formats come up, I'm confident that since they're not trying to push you into their ecosystem in a particular format, that they will probably look at it and they'll add it. For example, AZW3 they have on their devices. Now, once again, this is on the devices if you sideload into the devices, but there is another really cool piece I want to talk about, which is Pocketbook Cloud. Now, Pocketbook Cloud is really kind of the main reason why I use and really enjoy Pocketbook readers. Pocketbook Cloud is basically a web service that Pocketbook has, and anyone can sign up and create an account in Pocketbook Web. You don't have to have a device, and that's because Pocketbook Web is a web service where you can basically put documents, and either using a Pocketbook device or using a tablet or a phone or any device that you install the Pocketbook Reader app. They have a Pocketbook Reader app for iOS and Android that you can use. And if you use the Pocketbook Reader app or you have a Pocketbook device, then you can sync all of your documents across all your devices. And when I say sync, I mean you can sync your reading progress, you can sync bookmarks across all the devices. And all you really have to do to add a device to Pocketbook Web, there's two ways you can do it. They do have a send to Pocketbook Cloud, which is kind of like Amazon's, where you put a document in an email and it basically sends it to Pocketbook Cloud. Pocketbook Cloud does not convert your devices. Does not convert your formats. It just sends it in the format that you want. And that's because Pocketbook Cloud can read the following formats. It can read PDF, it can read EPUB, it can read text, it can read the comic book CBZ format, it can read RTF, it can read a host of different formats on Pocketbook Cloud. Now there's some they can't read on Pocketbook Cloud, but it's a wide enough variety of formats that if you put something on the cloud, you're in good shape. I primarily use EPUB on Pocketbook Cloud, and I also have done a couple comic book formats on Pocketbook Cloud, but I really enjoy the variety of formats you can get up there and how it syncs across all your devices. And that's a big gripe for me with Kobo, and well, I did a whole video on how I feel about Barnes & Noble, so I won't get into that. But that's a huge issue to me with Kobo, is that Kobo is all about you buying their books and reading their books. And if you're buying their books from their site and reading their books, then you can sync across devices. But if you sideload something, it doesn't look as good and it doesn't sync across devices. So that's why, Kobo has added in their newer devices support built in for Google Drive and for Dropbox. And at some point I might get a Kobo device just to play around with that and see what it's like. But I've also been underwhelmed by Kobo's ability to read just plain EPUBs. They have a proprietary KPUB format that they prefer you use on their devices. And if you use plain EPUB, sometimes the format is messed up, sometimes the size is messed up. So I will at some point get a Kobo to play around with it, but that's kind of why they never ended up as my main e-reader. So I'm going to jump to the Pocketbook Cloud, show you what the interface is like. Basically, you start at the dashboard, the thing that your last reading. Like I said, since it syncs across all devices, it knows that I opened up Shadowrun spells in Chrome on one of my e-readers. It kind of keeps some stats. Now, the stats for me aren't terribly accurate here, because I use an app called Bookshelf, and on Pocketbook Cloud, I really just keep books that I want to read in the coming year. I don't keep my whole library here. And once I finish a book on Pocketbook Cloud, I usually get rid of it. But you can sort, like I said, the dashboard. You can sort by ebooks, audiobooks, recently read. So they have a bunch of different ways that you can sort. You can also link your Pocketbook Cloud to your Adobe account. And adding books is super simple. Like I said, you can email your books and it will just add them to Pocketbook Cloud, kind of like a send to Kindle. Of course, they call it send to Pocketbook Cloud. What I almost always do is I add them on my computer, since most of my books are on Calibre or Caliber, but I like to call it Calibre. Most of my books are on Calibre, so I usually just add them from there. And I'm gonna, all you really do is go to upload new book. And I created a little folder called Pocketbook Demo. And I'm gonna add actually 3 different formats: PDF, CBZ, which is comic book format, and EPUB. So let me add those. And you can see it's pretty painless. And when you're done, you're done. And then you scroll down a little bit, you can see the new books have been added. And you can, when you're done, you can, just go ahead and, delete it when you're done. And I delete it when I'm done. Usually after I read a book, I will delete it when I'm done. Keep it. And delete that. Then I'm just going to refresh, and bam, I'm back. So that's Pocketbook Cloud. Like I said, it's available. Anybody who is using the Pocketbook Reader app or anybody who has a Pocketbook device can use Pocketbook Cloud. And it's one of the main reasons why I am a Pocketbook owner. So I guess that's it. Kind of taking you over a tour of Pocketbook. Talked a little bit about the devices, talked about the formats and why it was of interest to me, and also I showed you Pocketbook Cloud, which is pretty amazing. I will also include a link to the Pocketbook Reader app. You may just want to dip your toe in and test out the app and use Pocketbook Cloud to see how you feel about it. Obviously, I'm way too small. They're not paying me for this or anything. I just really like the devices, and I wish more people in North America were aware of them who are into owning their digital books, and people who are using, for example, Calibre, or people who even are using Adobe Digital Editions, and they want something that's a little bit more open, and maybe they like to mix up how they buy their books. So questions, comments, please leave them below. This is Ofori Murray, the Digital Reader, and keep reading.